Hey y'all, hey, my name is Mignon. So in this video, I will be talking about two books, which is The Inmate by Freida McFadden and then The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. I was gifted these two books in a care package from my friends when I graduated respiratory therapy school, and I would say I mostly prefer like thriller and horror type books, but this was my first two books by this author, as well as my first reading just in general in a really long time. So I figured I would do a video, and in this video I will be kind of dancing around the plot of The Inmate. It won't be super spoiler heavy just because I preferred this one a lot more. So I feel like my vibe is I'm gonna keep it vague if I liked the book, and I'm gonna spoil it if I didn't like the book. And it might be an unpopular opinion of me not liking Housemaid, but it's how I'm feeling. And I've also noticed that there's kind of like a hit or miss of whether or not you like Freida McFadden or not. But I will say, as someone who does mostly prefer thriller, I feel like these books are pretty good if you're someone who wants to learn or wants to try to get more into thriller. I feel like they're pretty like beginner friendly. There's not too much going on. There's not too much to follow. It's not super crazy. I wouldn't necessarily say there's anything you should worry about, but if you're the type of person who does have trigger warnings that you do need to check for, then obviously take the necessary precautions to stay safe and remain in a good headspace around those type of things. But yeah, otherwise, let's get into these books. Can you move? You're just in the way. Oh Lord. So the first book that I read from her was The Inmate. It looks like this. And then the second book I read from her was The Housemaid. You're just literally in the shot. You're in the shot. Oh my God. Okay, we're gonna go like this and you can see my mostly empty bookshelf because I'm starting from scratch, okay? So the first book I'm gonna talk about is The Inmate. Okay, so for those who might not know, I'm gonna read the synopsis in the book, and then I'll tell you kind of like some more information about it. So it says, the guiltiest people aren't always the ones behind bars. As a new nurse practitioner at a maximum security prison, Brooke Sullivan is taught 3 critical rules. 1, treat all prisoners with respect. 2, never reveal any personal information. And 3, never ever become too friendly with the inmates. But nobody knows that Brooke has already broken the rules. Nobody knows about her intimate connection to Shane Nelson, one of the penitentiary's most notorious and dangerous inmates. They certainly don't know that Shane was Brooke's high school sweetheart, the star quarterback, the golden boy who's serving a life sentence for a series of grisly murders, or that Brooke's testimony was what put him there. But Shane knows. He knows more than anyone, and he will never forget. The Inmate is a propulsive, mind-bending thriller about how we define guilt and who has to pay for it. So, in this book, basically it follows Brooke Sullivan, as you heard, who's a nurse practitioner who starts working. She goes back to her little small town after her parents die, and she starts working at this penitentiary, where naturally she has to deal with her ex-boyfriend. And we find out, this is not going to be spoiler free, so sorry about it. We find out that way back when, about 10 years prior, she and some friends and Shane were all at Shane's house, which was essentially just this big farmhouse in the middle of nowhere in a little rinky-dink town. And they were doing what high school kids do. They were drinking, having fun. And all of a sudden, one of the friends turns up murdered. And from there, the night just kind of erupts into chaos. And throughout this book, it is flashbacks between present day and what happened 10 years ago. And you're kind of following her thought process of reliving this account. She's trying to recall certain memories that have kind of blocked off, and at the same time she's also running into people who she knew way back when, because it's been, ever since that incident, it's been about 10 years since she's returned to her little town. So you're kind of following her through this experience of seeing Shane for the first time in 10 years, having to be around him for work, and then dealing with living back in this town where people can possibly recognize her, and just how she's navigating that. And she's also sparks an interest with an old best friend by the name of Tim, and they start to hit it off. And throughout reading this book, as she started becoming more and more suspicious of things that happened in the past and of people in present day life and making all these choices that she made, which I lied, this is gonna be pretty spoiler free. I'm gonna keep it pretty vague. My thought process, I thought I called it, bro. I thought I guessed the ending or guessed who was guilty of what. I thought I had it, and I slowly started changing my my thought process, and I was still kind of right. Like, I was pretty right throughout most of the book, but I don't know, I liked it. I thought the little snippet at the end where we get a new character perspective was unexpected. I will say that. In the section that this third, or I guess second character's perspective explains, I don't know how to word it. It gave an answer to a question that I didn't ask, because at that point I was like, well, good for her. Like, I didn't have the thought in my head of like, oh, how did this person die? Because I was like, well, oh well. And then at the end, it gives you that little nugget of what happened. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. So I will say I really enjoyed this book. I think I would probably give it like a 3.5. My rating scale isn't on anything particular. It's really just vibes. I didn't think that Brooke was an annoying character. And for me, especially FMCs, and especially FMCs in like a thriller situation, sometimes it's very hard for me to like this character. I know some characters are written to not be liked, and that's fine, but I don't know. I pretty much enjoyed her. I just hate when like characters in a thriller book, especially female characters, are written to be really annoying or written to be like always so damsel in distress vibes, and I really didn't get that from Brooke. Like, she seemed like she had a good head on her shoulder. Like, she could acknowledge when she overlooked something, or she could acknowledge when she felt like she was being crazy, but a lot of the time her intuition was like pretty decent, except for when it wasn't. And so I really liked that aspect of her character. Because I feel like I'm a very realistic person, and I can be dramatic when I want to be, but I feel like in thriller scenarios, a lot of times I read these characters and I'm like, I would never do that. And I understand that different scenarios, people react differently, but I don't know. I feel like in this situation, I felt like her thought process for a lot of things made sense, and I would probably be suspicious of things too. But I felt like she was really well written, and I felt like she was a likable character, so that was pretty good. So whether you like Freida McFadden or not, that's up to you. But if you haven't read anything by her, I feel like The Inmate was a really good first book to read, especially if you like thriller. I feel like it wasn't doing too much. I felt like the story was interesting, and I feel like this is probably a good entry-level book for people who aren't necessarily fans of thriller and don't really know what they would like. I feel like this isn't too much of a whodunit type of deal. Like, I don't know, I thought it was good, and I really enjoyed how she flipped from past and present. I feel like some authors, when they flip and it's like a dual storyline or a dual plot line like that, it can kind of get lost in the sauce. But I like that it was really clear cut when it was the past and when it was the future. I will say one thing that was different for me reading Freida McFadden, and maybe this is just more so modern thrillers as it is, I was not used to the chapters being so short. All the chapters were like 4 or 5, maybe 6 pages, and I feel like growing up and reading thrillers and reading other books, I feel like the chapters kind of went on for forever, so it was really refreshing to read a book that had really short chapters, but I didn't feel like I was missing anything. And I also really liked how she spaced out when it was going to flash back to the past, because I don't know, it was really nice not to know, okay, next chapter we're gonna get more of the past, but sometimes I'm like, oh my god, please, I want to know what's happening in the past already. Like, I'm over this present timeline. And she would hold out for another like 2 chapters. But I think it was really good. I liked the pacing of the story. I didn't think it was too slow. And I don't know, I don't really have too many negative criticisms about the book, so that's why I give it like a solid 3. Alright, so now I'm gonna be talking about Housemaid. This fucking book. This fucking book irritated me low-key. I was not a fan, so I'm gonna read the synopsis in the back of the book. It says, every day I clean the Winchesters' beautiful house top to bottom. I pick up their daughter from school and I cook a delicious meal for the whole family before heading up to eat alone in my tiny room on the top floor. I try to ignore how Nina makes a mess just to watch me clean it up, how she tells strange lies about her own daughter, and how her husband, Andrew, seems more broken every day. But as I look into Andrew's handsome brown eyes, so full of pain, it's hard not to imagine what it would be like to live Nina's life. The walk-in closet, the fancy car, the perfect husband. I try on one of Nina's pristine white dresses once, just to see what it's like, but she soon finds out. And by the time I realize my attic bedroom door only locks from the outside, it's far too late. But I reassure myself, the Winchesters don't know who I really am, they don't know what I'm capable of. And that's the synopsis for this fucking book. I'm gonna cuss a lot in this section because this book really aggravated my soul. I'm so sorry. So basically in this book, our main character, our female main character, goes by the name Millie. Her real name is like Wilhelmina, but she goes by Millie. And basically she just got out of prison not too long ago. So she did 10 years in prison, and we don't find out why she went to prison until like 3/4 way into this book. Like, it's damn near over by the time we actually explained why she's in prison, and that kind of furthers decisions made by other characters, or like justifies their actions. So we're following her, and she is living in the back seat of her car. She drives a Nissan. She's really adamant about telling you that she drives a Nissan, but she drives a Nissan, and she just recently got evicted from her apartment and also fired from the job that she had. And part of her parole is the fact that when you're on parole, you have to have a job, you can't do drugs, you have to have somewhere to live because otherwise you're violating. And when you meet up with your parole officer and they figure these things out, guess what? You're going back to jail. And she got out early, so if she was to go back to jail, she would have to finish the rest of her sentence, which I don't remember if it was going to be another 5 years or another 10, but I think it's another 5. Either way, this girl, down on her luck, apparently is really attractive, hasn't been around men in 10 years, is a little weird, isn't the biggest fan, or she's not really the biggest fan of being like social and things like that. And apparently she has like an estranged relationship with her family, and it's all very vague. And then she ends up doing a job interview with this housewife, and the housewife's name is Nina, and Nina is the housewife and a mother to a child that she shares with her husband. And her husband, I don't know what he does. He's some type of big hotshot in the New York area. I think they live in like Manhattan or somewhere around those parts. They are Long Island. I think it's Long Island. They're somewhere in New York. Either way. And she basically dresses down for her interview. She's wearing like a cardigan or whatever and some glasses that aren't real. Like, these are blue light glasses. Like, they're not prescription, babe. And she was like, well, she seems nice enough. I hope she doesn't do a background check on me. Boom. Fast forward a week. She's still living in her car, showering at truck stops, eating bologna sandwiches in the back of her Nissan. And she gets offered the job. And Nina's like, yeah, you can live in the house. We'll pay you. You're going to stay in this little room upstairs in the attic. Not in the guest room, in this nice estate that they have. She's going to live in the attic where it's small, it's cramped, it's a low closet. There's ain't shit in there but a bucket and a painted window. A window that's painted shut. And throughout the course of this book, we follow her and her interactions of cleaning and trying to feel like comfortable again. And slowly but surely, Nina just really starts to treat Millie, which is the main character, kind of like a piece of shit. Like, she loses something and is flipping out and automatically will make a mess and be like, you need to clean that up. I can't believe you would leave the house like that. She gives her a bag of clothes one day, and then a couple days later in the timeline, or however many days later, she is going through Millie's room and confronts her and was like, why do you have a bag full of my stuff? And she's like, what are you talking about? You just gave it to me. And basically you just watch as Nina becomes this person that is just a very unlikable character. And you're like, I personally did not like Nina, because the way she was talking to Millie, girl, you was not gonna talk to me like that. I'm sorry. Like, fuck you and this job. But I don't know, different strokes, different folks. And obviously she needed it. Like, Millie is very much the type where, like, she's like, I don't like Nina, but I need this job because I cannot go back to prison. I can't go back to prison. I can't go back to prison. I can't go back to prison. Until, spoiler, she gets it in her head that it's been a while since I've had some male company. And Andrew, which is Nina's husband, so her boss's husband, is looking mighty fine, but they're married. So instead, I'm just gonna flirt with the gardener, who's always outside for some reason. The gardener doesn't speak English, speaks maybe 3 collective words. He's Italian. And so she tries to get at him, and he's like, don't touch me. Also, you're in danger. I don't like you like that. Like, bam, bam, bam. I don't like you like that. You're kind of weird because I don't speak English. Also, you're in danger. And Millie takes you're in danger from a man who can barely string 4 words together to make a sentence. And she's like, that's a little odd. And really keeps going about her life. And I'm like, okay, girl, I respect the hustle to a certain extent. But she doesn't try to ask questions. She gets in her head a little bit that, like, she believes that he's talking about Nina and that Nina's a threat and all these things. And as the story progresses, you see the way people look at Nina, and she starts to find out that, oh yeah, she had to stay at a mental hospital for a while because, another spoiler, she tried to kill her daughter. Oh my god, crazy. The daughter's a little weird though, but like not weird enough for her to be trying to kill her own kid. But as this progresses, it just gets, you start to like Nina less and less. But then Millie really starts harping on the fact that she thinks Andrew's hot. She was like, this man is so fine, like I can't stop staring at him. And one of these days, oh Lord, they're having a rough time, and Andrew, the husband, is like, can you get some tickets to this Broadway musical? It would really make Nina happy. She talks to Nina about it. Nina's like, oh yeah, pick this day a week from Sunday. She's like, cool. She does it. It comes up. And it turns out that Nina all of a sudden can't go. And she's like, I told you, not that Sunday, the next Sunday, yada, yada, yada. You're gonna, if we can't get these tickets refunded, it's coming out of your check. And apparently it's a big shot, like Broadway musical, so it's expensive. And she's like, okay. And the husband ends up covering for her and is like, hey, I wasn't able to refund the tickets, but it's fine. You can just go by yourself. Like, we have a hotel room, because it was out of the city. So I think the Broadway musical was in like downtown New York or somewhere, wherever. It's on Broadway. I don't know where Broadway is. I'm not from New York. And sorry, my phone's going off. She's like, well, I don't really want to go by myself. He's like, oh, bring a friend. She's like, well, I don't have any. So because Nina is out of town, they decide to go to the musical together. And they end up going to dinner, and they go to the musical, and then they end up hooking up. And up until that point, I really liked Millie. And I was looking for them. I was like, okay, girl, yeah, like, fuck her husband. Like, she kind of a bitch. Like, you deserve to get your husband fucked. I'm sorry. Like, she fucked your husband, and I was fine with it. I was like, they have chemistry, and really, you don't know these people. Granted, she is housing you and paying you, and in theory, keeping you from going back to prison, but like, if you don't like her, she's treating you like shit, fuck her husband. Get your lick back. I don't know what to tell you. And then from that point on, things started getting, this is where it took a turn for me, where I did not like Millie anymore. Because ever since she fucked that man, she got it in her head that that was her man. Very much, oh, I'm in love with him. Oh, he deserves to be treated better than this. Yippee yap. The hoe is delusional, giving very much pick me. I would never treat Andrew like this. He deserves the earth and the sun and the moon. She didn't say that verbatim, but like, it's the vibe she's giving. Like, she was like, just was doing the most. She slept with him once and immediately was doing the absolute most. And essentially, Nina and Andrew have a big falling out, and he ends up kicking Nina out. And in the process, she is at the top of the stairs in this little ass, outside of her little ass room, which we find out earlier in the story that it has a lock on the outside. So if you're inside the room, anyone that's outside of the room can lock you in and there's no way to get out. And it's towards the back of the house. So also no one could like hear you scream. It's soundproofed, all this shit. And during their argument, she's standing at the top of the stairs, and Nina turns and sees her and is like, are you fucking kidding me? You've been listening this whole time. And Millie goes, do you want me to help you pack? Huh? I don't even have words. I would cuss her smooth the hell out. This hoe is delusional. To look me in my face while I'm getting thrown out by my husband, for you to sit here and tell me, do you need help packing? Done. I would have been on 10 o'clock news. I'm so sorry, because what? Anyway, and from that point on, it gets crazy. And we basically see her, and she's like, still kind of weirded out about certain things in the house, is what it is, and takes it upon herself that they just gonna be hunching all over that damn house. And eventually she's like, well, I'm gonna move my stuff into like the main room. Like, the fact that she's like, it's kind of weird if I stay sleeping up in the attic, and I feel like it's too soon for me to be in the master bedroom, so I'll be in the guest room. And at one point, Andrew comes home and it's like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, well, I was gonna move some of my stuff. And he goes up there to help her move her stuff. They end up hunching, and she wakes up the next morning. Her phone's gone, and she's locked in the room. The door's locked, she can't get out. And then the POV switches, and it switches to Nina, and Nina is basically going through these steps that she has. Very Gone Girl-esque. And basically, we get the backstory of how she had just had her daughter, which is not Andrew's kid. So this is just Nina's daughter. She had her daughter. She was working for her boss, who embarrassed her because she had lactated through her shirt. And Andrew, like, talked to her and took her to dinner, and they hit it off. And then they got married. And she's like, everything was peachy keen. It was great. And then she noticed that he was very particular about certain things that she did. Like, she's a bleach blonde, and so when her roots grow out, he locked her in the attic. The one that Nina had put Millie in when she moved in working for them, put her in the attic and was like, you need to rip out 100 strands of your hair, and I want to be able to see the root. It made her do it twice. And then had her, like, dehydrated and starved for like 4 days. And was like, I want 100 pieces of hair. And then she did it, and he was like, well, one wasn't good enough. That very last piece of hair, it wasn't from the root, and I could tell, so you need to do it again. And waited a whole 24 hours, made her do it again. And so he very quickly, you see that he is the type where he believes that there are rules and ways you should act. And so we are following through the progression of her telling different stories, or whatever the case may be, of times where he put her in the room for different things. And we find out that one of the times that she was being punished, she had woken up after the fact and didn't know where he was, heard water running. Turns out that he had left her daughter in the bathtub to drown. And because she was so weak, and drugged, unbeknownst to her, while she was fighting to get her daughter out of the bathtub, he had called the cops and was like, oh, I think my wife's gonna hurt herself and the kid. And then they end up taking her to a mental facility, saying that she tried to hurt herself and her kid. The whole time it was Andrew. And so we see her, like, explain how she tried many times to get away from him, bargained, and he threatened her in many different ways, and just really just put her through a lot of torture. And so her plan was to hire someone that he could not resist, someone who is a desperate pick-me, and that is where Millie comes into play. She immediately background checked this girl and was like, oh yeah, she went to jail, but she's pretty and hot and thin and looks better than me. And that was the other part, was the more Andrew started to like Millie, the less he started to care about how Nina carried herself. So she was letting her roots grow. She was packing on the weight. She was doing all this stuff to make herself repulsive because she could get away with it to a certain extent, because he couldn't lock her in that room since Millie was in that room. And basically, by the time Millie finds out that Andrew is not what he seems, it is too late for our girl. She is in that room, and she ends up completing the task that he wanted, and she tries to play it off and makes everything seem like it's gonna be okay. And then she does a, oop, gotcha bitch, and ends up locking him in the room and forcing him to put all these books stacked on his genitals, which for her, he made her stack them on her stomach, and so she was all bruised up. And she locked him in the room for like 2 days, and then slid pliers under the door and was like, if you want to get out of here, you need to pull your own teeth out from the root. And then the POV switches back again to Nina, who comes home because the gardener, spoiler, they end up hooking up, but it doesn't really go anywhere. The gardener is like, that's not fair. You tried to get out of that situation and you used Millie as a scapegoat, and now she's back. She's been locked up. Her car hasn't moved in 3 days. So she comes back to the house just to find Millie there, and to find Andrew dead in that in the attic with his teeth pulled out, covered in blood. And then we find out a little bit prior to this that the reason why Millie was in jail in the first place, because she had stopped a football player from sexually assaulting one of her friends, and she bashed his head in until he died with a paperweight. And so that's why she was in jail for 10 years. So that's like the little Easter egg. So in Nina's mind, Millie was great because she was attractive, but also because in her mind she was like, well, giving her criminal record, she'll probably be able to defend herself if worse comes to worse, because she already killed someone prior. And then we open back up basically to the first scene of the book, where there's a undescribed female character sitting on the couch. And we don't know at the beginning of the book if that's going to be Nina or Millie, because we didn't know who was who. And now it is Nina sitting there, and she's like, yeah, I found the body. I didn't know he was locked up in here for all these days. I had gave my maid the week off, like, I'm so sorry. And the cop lets her go because his daughter was engaged to Andrew prior to Andrew and Nina getting together, and he knew that he was a fucking weirdo to some extent, and he couldn't prove it, so he helps Nina and Millie get off by saying that it was an accidental death and he genuinely just locked himself in the attic and couldn't get out. And then we see her at the funeral. And we see Nina, and Andrew's family comes up, which the whole time she didn't like the mom. The mom was very weird. And one of the last things the mom says to her, she was like, you know, we saw the coroner's report about the missing teeth. And she goes, I always told him dental hygiene was very important and there are consequences to your actions. She straightens her dead son's collar and walks away. So it's alluded to the fact that he gets his crazy ass punishments and ideas of these rules and consequences from his mother. She literally verbatim was like, yeah, he didn't brush his teeth one time when he was little, so I ripped his teeth out from the root. Like one of his teeth out. And she's like, oh. And then we fast forward back to Millie's point of view, where she is interviewing with a new housewife, and they're like, oh yeah, Nina recommended you. And she like shifts and shows that she has bruises on her arm. And then Millie puts it together that that woman is being abused by her husband. And she was like, yeah, she says you do really good work. Would you be like interested in taking this job? And Millie's like, yeah, I'll take it. My issue with this is the fact that the whole time, up until she slept with that lady's husband, she was very much like, I need to keep my nose clean and stay out of trouble. Oh, you just got away with essentially committing murder for a second time. You got away by the skin of your teeth, and now you're gonna sit here and take another job to do it again? It was a one in a... First of all, you didn't get away with it the first time, even though it was arguably in self-defense to some extent, right? You didn't get away with it the first time. You did 10 years. And now you're out. And you did it and you got away with it. So you're going to go do it again? That's the part that really pissed me off. Because halfway through the book, she sleeps with this lady's husband, turns into a pick-me, realizes there are consequences to her actions in thinking that you can just like trust a man who you don't even know, right? And then now you're willing to risk everything you worked hard to get and to keep to go do it again. And that sets us up for the second book in the series. So much to unpack. Honestly, I give it a 3. I thought it was good, but by the time we got to Nina's POV, where she's explaining her steps of how she was gonna get out of this situation and out of this marriage and all that, at that point I was like, oh, so Andrew's a crazy one. Okay. Like, I really didn't give a fuck. I'm not gonna lie. I stopped caring. I was like, well, I kind of hope Millie gets out of it, but I mean, she kind of made her bed. Like, you want us to take that lady's husband? Now you got him. Now you got him. Congrats. Finders keepers. Congrats. Like, I just stopped kind of caring about what happened to Millie at that point. But I will say, I like that she was a resourceful queen, because a lot of these books, especially in thrillers, they love to write female characters as these like hopeless idiots sometimes, and who are like too afraid to do anything. My girl pepper sprayed him and snatched his phone and ran out the room. Like, she was on it. She was about it. And I like that about Millie. But her becoming a pick-me and then getting in that situation in the first place, I was like, you could have slept with him and just kept it pushing. You didn't have to think you could move in and help a bitch pack and all this other stuff. I don't know. It just lost me. And I don't know. I'm probably going to read the rest of the series just because that's who I am as a person. But I would give it a solid 3. I did not like this book as much as The Inmate, but I don't think it was like the worst thing I've ever read in my entire life. So for that, I will give it a 3. Okay guys, and that is pretty much it, my review for The Inmate and The Housemaid. This was my first time doing a book review, or I guess 2 book reviews, so expect more to come. I'm definitely going to be filming a lot more book content. This YouTube channel is just purely going to be for books, anything and everything book related. And then I have a separate account for my like lifestyle and just everyday stuff, which will all be linked in the description box down below. But yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more books. Bye!